from UNAIDS. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Policy Advocacy and Knowledge at UNAIDS. I'm a bit intimidated by this room. We wanted to have a conversation, a dialogue with civil society, but you're all sitting very far. So if you don't mind, if you want to, please come to the front. This is supposed to be a dialogue, which feels very difficult when you're sitting 50 meters away from us. So please come and join us. And Vui, don't you want to join us too? Come and join us too. We are having a bit of a change of plan. This session was supposed to be a really interactive session with two panels to talk about how communities, or whether communities are able to lead in the HIV response. As many of you know, we have a new World AIDS Day report, which was out last week. Is it me who's making notes? Which is called Let Communities Lead. And we wanted to meet many of you who are here, who are from civil society, and have a conversation about how we facilitate this leadership of communities in a world of polycrisis, in a world where civic space is shrinking, in a world where HIV is not always the highest on the agenda in many countries, including in donor countries. But we feel, because we have had a bit of struggle, I think, the last couple of days, to ensure that communities have the space that they need and deserve in the spaces that we are occupying here at the AIDS conference in Africa. So we've changed our way of doing things a little bit. Initially, we had 2 short panels, and we had invited a couple of you to also engage from the floor. And our executive director, Winnie Byanyima, was going to respond. Winnie has to leave in about 30 minutes. Many of our communities have been engaged elsewhere today and have been occupied by by things that have happened in the last 24 hours in terms of community engagement around the conference. So we think it is better to open up the space for a real dialogue. So we have asked our participants to speak very briefly, 3 minutes each, and most of the participants know me well, so I'm quite good at cutting people off when they speak too long. We'll ask you for 3 minutes of short statements, and really you can decide what you want to talk about. The initial question was, how can we work better as UNAIDS to facilitate community engagement at all levels, at country level, at global level, and at regional level. But we know that many of you have other issues on your minds. You have the presence of the executive director here. You have other members of the senior team, the regional director, the country director, Fode Simaga, one of our directors from Geneva. So we want you to be able to address the leadership of UNAIDS in a free way and speak to what you think matters most at this moment, at this point in the conference. But if you want to speak about what you had prepared to speak about, you might also do that. I'm still not sure if we have translation. Do we have translation? We do? Wonderful. So I will open up the panel and I will allow everybody to speak. And I want to start with the Francophone participants, because we have struggled to ensure that Francophone Africans are included as much as we need you to be included. Your voices matter to all of us. So I want to start with Madiara and Patrick, and I will go to the rest of the panel. So please forget a little bit what we had planned. We know things have changed in the last couple of days, and I'll give you the word. And Madiara, please speak for about 3 minutes. I think you can speak there, right? And she will be translated, and you guys have headsets, I hope. Yeah? Okay. And if there are no headsets, if you need help, has everybody got a headset? There's headsets here as well. Okay, go ahead.
Oui, merci à l'ONU-SIDA de nous avoir associés à ce panel. Je voudrais également remercier les organisateurs de la conférence qui nous permettent de prendre la parole en français dans un pays anglophone. Alors, rapidement, comme j'ai juste 3 minutes, je pense qu'il y a 3 points clés sur lesquels je voudrais Le premier point, c'est la durabilité des financements pour permettre à la société civile et aux acteurs communautaires de continuer le travail qu'ils réalisent. Nous nous rendons compte que pour des financements en direction de certaines populations, comme les populations clés, ce sont des financements qui viennent essentiellement de l'extérieur. Il n'y a pas de financement domestique. Et même quand il y a des tensions sur le financement, les premières coupes se font au niveau des interventions communautaires et surtout sur la prévention. Donc c'est vraiment comment documenter. Donc en tant que ONU-SIDA, vous pouvez nous aider à voir quelles sont les bonnes approches en termes de financement domestique qui existent. On sait qu'il y a des questions de contractualisation qui existent dans certains pays, il y a la parafiscalité, le secteur privé qui est engagé. Donc pour nous, si vous arrivez à documenter, à ressortir des points clés qui peuvent servir de plaidoyer avec les pays pour assurer la pérennité de ces financements domestiques pour les organisations de la société civile, ce serait quelque chose de très apprécié. La deuxième chose, c'est que les interventions communautaires s'appuient sur des acteurs qui sont en ligne de front. Donc les pères éducateurs, les conseillers communautaires, malheureusement, qui se retrouvent dans la précarité. Et dans nos différents pays, les stratégies de santé communautaire se bâtissent sans forcément prendre en compte ce type de population. On fait la distinction entre les agents de santé communautaire gérés par les ministères de la Santé, mais les agents de santé communautaire issus des communautés qui font la paire éducation ne sont pas suffisamment pris en compte. Et on aimerait peut-être que l'ONU-SIDA puisse nous appuyer pour pouvoir faire un plaidoyer, faire le diagnostic et faire le plaidoyer. Pour nous, c'est aussi une voie pour la pérennisation des interventions communautaires qui sont réalisées, surtout en direction de certaines populations marginalisées. Dernier point de mon intervention, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup d'innovations qui sont aujourd'hui disponibles. On parle de la PrEP, il y a l'autotest, nous avons également même la charge virale pour pouvoir faire le suivi des malades, mais très souvent la communication et même le marketing pour accompagner l'utilisation de ces nouvelles méthodes de prévention et même de suivi des malades ne sont pas suffisants. Pour la PrEP, les populations clés, les travailleuses de sexe ont parfois du mal à suivre correctement. On démarre le traitement, mais pour le continuer, on a des problèmes parce que la préparation en termes de communication, de marketing autour n'a pas été suffisante. Et même pour la charge virale également, quand les plateformes n'existent pas, pour pouvoir disponibiliser donc la charge virale, faire en sorte que les patients aient la charge virale, c'est un problème. Et quand les plateformes existent, elles sont sous-utilisées. Donc la nécessité d'appuyer le gouvernement pour mettre en place des systèmes de convoyage. Merci.
Thank you, Madiara. Maybe because I think not everybody has a translation set, so just a quick summary.
So the summary, good afternoon, is like, Winnie, thanks for having convened all of the civil society for this discussion today. She has 3 points. The first point is the financing for community globally, but community-led specifically. Anytime that there is a financial tension at the country level, they first cut the money for the community, and then it's even worse for the key community-led organization. So that one, how UNAIDS could help fix that. The second point was the sort of mix between community health worker and community-led response, which is not the same, even they are complementary, how UNAIDS could help to reinforce, maintain, strengthen the community-led. And the third point is how to make innovation available, program and innovation available, to anybody. Sometimes not available. When it's available, it's not used. So how could we collectively work on this?
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madiara, and thank you, Foda, for translating. I will let both Francophone speakers speak first. Patrick, you want to also speak in French? Yeah? Okay. You don't even have a microphone.
3 minutes, ok. Merci à l'ONU-SIDA de l'occasion donnée. Merci, Madame la Directrice. On était ensemble au Cameroun il y a quelques mois et je suis heureux d'être avec vous sur ce panel à nouveau. Quand on me passe le micro en général, en me donnant le libre ton de parler de ce que je veux, on s'attend à ce que j'aille sur un créneau que je maîtrise assez bien, qui est l'engagement communautaire des adolescents et des jeunes. Mais cette fois, je vais plutôt parler en tant que deuxième vice-président du 6e Cameroun pour engager la question qui pour moi est centrale dans le cadre de ce que nous sommes en train de faire. Comment UNAIDS peut accompagner au mieux les communautés pour qu'on ait un réel engagement, simplement en protégeant l'engagement communautaire. Madame la directrice, à l'heure où je vous parle, l'engagement communautaire, de mon point de vue, n'a jamais été aussi en danger. Par le fait qu'aujourd'hui, on ne sait pas qui est communautaire. C'est le premier point de la discussion. Un point qui, dans le cas de l'exercice de mes fonctions au CCM, s'est posé. Est-ce qu'on est communautaire du point de vue de notre ressenti, du point de vue du vécu qu'on a, du point de vue de l'engagement volontaire qu'on met dans la réponse au VIH, ou on est communautaire parce qu'on est fonctionnaire, ou on est communautaire parce qu'on est un PTF? La question se pose. Qui est considéré comme communautaire? Qui sont les communautés qu'aujourd'hui il faut protéger pour être sûr que les objectifs qu'on s'est fixés en matière de réponse au VIH-Sida puissent se matérialiser? C'est une question centrale. On ne pourra pas faire aujourd'hui sans commencer par là. Définir clairement qui représente les communautés ou qui sont les communautés et ensemble mettre en œuvre des processus et des mécanismes pour sécuriser cette participation communautaire. Le deuxième point, il est en lien avec la région que je représente, qui est l'Afrique de l'Ouest et du Centre, majoritairement francophone, qui, je ne vous apprends rien, est la région qui enregistre en ce moment le plus de retard sur la majorité des indicateurs de la réponse au VIH-Sida. 2030, c'est pour bientôt. Comment on s'assure de l'équité? Comment on garantit qu'en 2030, au moment où on va faire les bilans et dire là c'est bien, là c'est bien, là c'est bien, on ne va pas revenir en Afrique de l'Ouest et du Centre et dire là ça ne va pas trop, là on peut repousser. On ne veut pas repousser pour cette session. Voilà les deux points que j'avais évoqués pour ce panel. Merci.
So Winnie wanted to thank you. He had the chance to meet you during your country visit in Cameroon recently. This is what he was saying, that he met you in Cameroon where you were in your country visit in July. And he has two main questions. He's a youth representative, but he didn't want to talk about youth, but talk about the role and the place and the engagement of civil society in the CCM in the country. And there is always discussion about who are really the civil society in those CCM, and is a way to minimize them and to not engage them really deeply. That was the first question. The second question is, as you know, if you look at all the targets, WCA is lagging behind, is an injustice, is inequitable. How could you help to restore that balance and equitable between Southern Africa and Western Central Africa in terms of response?
Thank you. And because we're so civil society, we didn't introduce people to save on time, but it's really good to hear Madiara from Alliance Côte d'Ivoire, who is a PR, so a very different voice to somebody from a youth-led organization in Cameroon. Thank you both. I know we don't have much time, so I need to make a decision about who will be the next speaker before Winnie leaves. I don't know how to make that decision. Many of you speak to Winnie often. I think it's important. Are there any burning issues you want to bring to UNAIDS to Winnie's attention before she responds? Everybody. Okay, then everybody has 1 minute, but you will have 1 minute. One issue that hasn't been said. Is it working? Okay.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'll make it quick. I think one of the things, my name is Richard Lusimba and I'm from Uganda. If we are to end AIDS by 2030, one of the things that we need to focus on is decriminalization of key populations. That's a key thing. We cannot talk about communities when they cannot come to the table or they cannot even access services. Secondly, the involvement of our leaders, and I'm so happy and delighted to see the Katiklo from Buganda Kingdom here with us. So the engagement of cultural leaders in the fight against HIV is really important. So we need to ensure that everybody's on board. As we bring communities, let the political will be seen. Let's see the involvement of the cultural leaders because together then we'll be able to work together. But most importantly, decream, decream, decream.
Thank you, Richard. And Richard is from Uganda. Grace, was it you? Quick, 1 minute.
In addition to that, as we are saying, let communities lead. Two things. One, genuine engagement and genuine partnership. Let us not just say, let communities lead, but they don't sit on the table. And then number two, let us give resources to communities, because communities, we know how to do it, and we have our lived realities. Thank you. My name is Grace Kamau from the African Sex Workers Alliance.
Thank you, Grace. And Cedric, did you have your hand up too? Also 1 minute.
Yeah, we make it quick. I think
there's lobbying going on here.
oh yeah, I will make it very short. I think I was talking to colleagues a few minutes ago, and then my conclusion is that every cloud has a silver lining. It's good that we saw what we saw in terms of what is happening. People hear about discrimination and criminalization, but they don't see it happening. So that's one point. And the second point is that this is a space that was created for the community to meet and then strategize. I guess UNH should have a say in terms of how do we create this space and do some kind of double checking if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Lillian, 1 minute. Now I've been lobbied. Everybody has 1 minute, so I'll be fair. Yeah, well, I'll come back to Rosemary. I've seen it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lillian Morocco with the International Community of Women Living with HIV. Communities leading is just tokenistic, and we cannot say it more than now. We fought for this space. We fought for these spaces. It's not like anything came by itself. No, we worked hard. We slept in tunnels. We undressed to see what we have now. But unfortunately, it still remains tokenistic. And I think that is where we need to be getting to. We are happy with where we are in terms of being given that platform in terms of a statement. We need to move it to where it deserves to be. And my call to action before Winnie leaves is that when we defined what community-led, community responses meant, we were very clear, and it is clear now that it has been given. What we need now is action. I want to propose that we have a technical working group convened immediately for us to sit as global networks and regional and national level to agree on how we want to take this forward, and also to agree on what resources are needed and where do we get those resources.
Thanks, Lillian. I'm going to run with my microphone because, Rosemary, you don't have one.
Yes, thank you. My name is Rosemary Mburu with Waki Health. We co-convene the Africa Free of New HIV Infections and the Global Fund Advocates Network Africa. So at the Montreal, the AIDS conference last year, I remember Mama Winnie and many others of us, some of here on the stage and others here, we really pushed on the decolonization of the AIDS response. And our point was that if there are spaces in this world that where we can't lead, where countries in low and middle income countries cannot lead, we don't need to go into those spaces for conferences. So I want us to then, this is an African-based conference, and I want us to even forget about Canada, Australia, and all that. If we can put our things in order here at home, it will be even much better. For us not accessing those spaces there, what is the value of us advocating for decolonization if we can't access the spaces here in our region, in our countries? So that's something to look at in terms of the space, the civic space, and I believe that together, collectively, as a community of advocates, what has happened here is something that really we need to re-strategize and think how we move forward.
Thank you. Vui, last 1 minute before we give the floor to Winnie.
Yeah, I'm sitting in a very awkward position, and I'm busy silencing my ancestors to just lie down and wear my hat as the Global Fund because I'm deeply disturbed. in Africa, in Southern Africa, that we allow ourselves to be in this space in this way, it feels like 20 years ago. So I want us to recognize that there's a regression. And if there's a regression, how do we continue to talk about the last mile, the last 6 years? How do we reach it in this environment? And I think what's happening to the key populations in this conference is disgusting. What's happening to sex workers, to young people, is disgusting. And I'm saying this as we say are living with HIV, not as Global Fund. We're in Global Fund, UNAIDS with Global Fund and many other partners. We have to dig deep in our diplomatic voices and see what else needs to be done behind the scenes. What more can we do and say behind the scenes that this doesn't look like we're embarrassing ourselves? Because I went to the same place. So how do we ensure that when we're in Canada, we feel like we can scream and shout? When we're in our own homes, we can't do the same things we do in front of white people. We can't do it in front of our own black governments. It just feels very wrong. And I think it's something that needs to be said when our leaders are meeting our leaders. Please say that we are sitting here, not because we are defeated. We are sitting here in acknowledgement that we are still prepared to go a last mile with our leaders. They need to meet us halfway. That's all we are asking. They need to meet us halfway. And I think when we push communities to a corner, something is going to break, and we don't want that break to happen in the same high-burden countries. We are really, honestly, something has to change for the last mile. It can be status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have done the unimaginable. We had 10 community leaders speak in 20 minutes in 2 languages. I think we have never done that before. Winnie, over to you to respond, but also to say we don't need to end the conversation when Winnie has to leave. We can continue a bit more. I know we rushed it. That wasn't how it was intended. But over to you, Winnie.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you, fellow panelists here. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Uganda Kingdom, thank you for being here. You are the voice of that very powerful king who's put his weight and leadership behind fighting HIV and talking to young men on this issue. Thank you for being here. All of you, thank you for coming. I salute you all. Times are difficult here. I hear you mentioning key issues like financing for your movement to continue the fight. This is real. Resources are going away. We need to think of how we will keep this movement going, speaking, defending rights without resources from Western donors, Northern donors. That's a real issue. I want us to talk about it. You're talking about the civic space that has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and continues to shrink. Real challenge. I'm sitting here next to Richard. We are both Ugandans. Everyone's talking about the Anti-Homosexuality Act there. But the truth is that across Africa, the reverberations are real. In countries where they were not harassing, arresting, they are arresting again. In countries where they have a law, they are thinking of making another law like Uganda. So the pushback is real. So what are we going to do about it? I have some thoughts here. One, I think that we have to get ourselves out of the mindset of a movement that is funded externally. We have to now think of how do we hold hands with others and fight together. The issues we are fighting on are human rights. There's also a wide human rights movement. The issues we are fighting on are women's rights. There's a big women's rights movement. I am a heterosexual old woman coming from the women's rights movement. When I speak about LGBTQ rights, when I speak about gay men, men who have sex with men, I carry a strong voice because I'm not one of them, but I'm speaking for their rights. So this linking of movements is critical. Don't take this lightly. You need to go and be part of wider human rights movement, wider women's rights movement, and fight together. You're more powerful, you reduce the risk to yourselves by sharing the So that's a hard message, but I give it to you. And I come to you as from another movement, as I've told you. I grew up in the women's rights movement. So reach them and fight alongside with them. The days when you had your own money doing your own thing are gone. The other point I want to make is analyze. Analyze, 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 and drive our own African agenda. Let's be honest, aid distorts. This money from outside comes with its own priorities. So when you are speaking, ask yourself, I see some of you, I am Global Fund Ambassador, I am, I don't know, PEPFAR Ambassador. Is what you are saying an African agenda, an agenda for your people? Because Global Fund is many countries. They may be supporting you, but you, what are you carrying? Is it a message for your people, or is it a message they've given you to pass on? Change your name even. Say, I'm an ambassador for African people. Don't call yourself an ambassador for the donor. Why should you be? Yes. You say, I'm ambassador for my people, supported by a donor. Being supported by is different from being their spokesperson. So this is about the decolonizing. The decolonizing. We fought that those visas in Canada were something else. I spoke out about them, denying us our chance to be there to speak. Now here we have to acknowledge, government of Zimbabwe didn't deny us visas, did it? It didn't. We are here, the doors were open to come. So let's recognize that. Then, when we came here, this space and what we have to say, we felt some restrictions. That's a fact also. Let's engage them. Let's engage them and tell them that we came here to speak our own true voices. We didn't come to disrupt them, but we came to use our space to speak our issues. I'm going to meet the leaders and tell them politely like that really you didn't mean to disrupt them or to cause scenes in their country, but we wanted to speak our honest voice in the space they have created for us. So I want us to come out of this conference as successful Africans, having convened and exchanged and had good outcomes, not as having had a confrontation with a government that has worked hard to convene us here. Challenges are there, but let's face them very, very maturely and move on and understand our context and navigate it. Lastly, you mentioned West Africa being left behind as compared to this region. There's some truth there. The big burden is here in Eastern Southern. West Africa has a burden too, and a serious one, because it is increasing. Western Central Africa, we need to pay strong attention there. For us as UNAIDS, we are trying. We've developed more relationships with some of the funders who fund West African countries to try and get support to strengthen our work there. But between ourselves, we should do things together. I would be interested to see whether you have cross-region relationships to strengthen yourselves and your capacities, and I might prioritize them with our little resources. So think of how you can. I found many things to learn here in Zimbabwe. The sex worker program here, it is strong, and it is strong because the government realized that while it does not accept sex work and it's a crime, it realized that sex workers are there and need services. So they amended their law such that it is very difficult to prosecute. So the police got off the back of sex workers in this country That created some space. Then there was NGOs who were able to program. Now there's a wide program in the whole country, and many are reached. And they are reached in dignity. They are not reached like government hospitals, frowned upon. No, these are services that serve them in dignity by an NGO. So I think this is a model to share across the continent, because their criminal law is still there, because they are not ready to repeal, but services are there, and sex workers are alive and are treated in dignity. So these are some of the sharings we can have. And I would encourage that you make programs for supporting each other. This is the kind of thing we would want to prioritize and put our little support on. I want to stop there and say, let me go to see some of the big leaders, and I'll take your voice there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Winnie. And apologize if we were very informal, but we had to manage time. I want to invite you to still stay. We will allow Winnie to leave, and thank you very much. But you still have some of us here, and maybe there are also some conversations that still want to happen, especially how we adjust to the situation that we're in right now. People have spoken, Rosemary, Wiseka, others have spoken about what do we do. And if people will still want to use that space in the next 15 minutes, please let us use it, but allow Winnie to take her leave. If you don't want to use the space, then you don't have to. But if you do want to, please feel free. And it also goes for all of you. You only had a minute. You're allowed to have another minute if you want to add something.
I would say that Richard here and Lydian here should tell you how they are fighting that anti-homosexuality law, if people are interested. We need your support. That law has to go.
Okay. Okay. How do people feel? Do you want to have another minute and discuss, or do you feel like you have said enough? Say, sorry, Rosemary. Do you want to sit here, Rosemary, because then you also have a mic? Do you any other people want to speak? In the audience? I don't know how we will facilitate it, but I'm sure we will. I saw a hand over there. Did I see a hand? But let me start with Rosemary and with Cedric.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to what I said and to clarify that, and we really see that there hasn't been visa restrictions coming to Zimbabwe, and completely agree with Winnie in terms of the fact that we've been hosted here. And so that's something to appreciate on that side. The flip side of to that, which is what I was saying, is that the restriction we have here is not a visa-related restriction, but it's still a restriction. That means that people in their own region cannot access the space, like the way people would desire to actually do that. So that's what I was bringing forward, and I think my call is really also to the organizers, like the ICASA Secretariat, the Society for AIDS in Africa, because communities and civil society have said many, many, many times, let us review the criteria of how we host these spaces and look at the restrictions that will limit people's meaningful and optimized participation. So that really is my appeal going forward. I think this has come so many times. I remember when ICASA was going to be in Uganda, and communities and civil society wrote numerous letters and said, how can we have a conversation when you are at the environment? And going back to what colleagues were saying in terms of the decriminalization and all that, they are very, very, very connected issues. And I think those are some of the things on the path to ending the epidemic.
Thanks, Rosemary. So I've heard two things, because this was also about UNAIDS and what we can do. Lillian has made a very clear demand. Let's sit together, and maybe not just UNAIDS, but we're a joint program of many co-sponsors, but also partners with the Global Fund and with PEPFAR. And and really have a conversation about how do we make this leadership a reality and where are the gaps and what can we do together. So we take this as UNAIDS. We have also heard, I think we're hearing quite clearly that we have to have a conversation about how we're having those conferences and create this space that is meaningful on the continent. And I like how you reflected this, Rosemary. We go elsewhere and shout about the restrictions. We need to make sure that we do the best we can here. Or even if it is the right way of bringing voices together, is there a different way of doing that? And we will have that conversation with the ICASA, but also amongst ourselves. And obviously we will invite community voices into that. Okay, so I've heard two things, apart from all the very direct asks that you have made, which I think are asks that are a bit more general than for UNAIDS in particular. Cedric, why am I having complications with your name? Cedric.
Maybe because I'm looking at you so much. So I had the third one. I'm not managing to say it in a non-violent way, I would say. But I would like to express myself a little bit more and then say, I say in the beginning, in every cloud there is a silver lining. And I was referring to the fact that we saw what is the everyday life of the community. So we saw it present, we saw it physically, and then we are experiencing it. That's one thing. The second thing is about, this is a space that we didn't decide to have it yesterday. So it's been months, it's been, there's a time that has been, and then efforts and all preparation. So again, I don't feel like we can play the victims, but we also need to come and understand that maybe there's a job that we didn't do better. And then that's why I was calling UNAIDS. A space like this is really important. And when we create this space, we have to agree beforehand what are the minimum conditions and how is this space is going to be safe and keep the principle we're fighting for. So I don't want us to say, oh, it happened, like we are surprised. We should not be surprised, but we should learn and then say, maybe next time, let's do it better. And this is why I'm calling UNAIDS, do the check. Do the check and then make sure that this is right. And I think in whatever capacity, you should have that power to have that decision. And the root is not here. The root is somewhere else. I would like to talk this more. Maybe if we have this conversation, let's not look where things are not. Actually, let's look on the problem. Where is it coming from? And I mean, I don't know how to express this. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Cedric. Grace, did you want to add something?
Yeah, there's something that we talked about, that sex workers are working with the government and the program is working. And my question is the community, is that a voice of the community or is that the voice of the government? So we need to be very careful. And then we are saying that there's an enabling environment, but there's still a law that criminalizes sex work. So governments change all the time. So it will work now, but what happens if governments change? And then the madness also continues. So we need to check, is it the voice of the community or is it the government saying, is it working for communities? Because from where I sit, I know still sex workers get arrested in Zimbabwe. Still sex workers face a lot of violence here. So we need to be very real in this conversation. And then maybe another thing is an issue around, what has worked. She said, how can we learn from each other? There's a program that the African Sex Workers Alliance, we've run for 15 years called the African Sex Workers Academy, that we've also built a lot of sex workers advocates around the continent. In West Africa, we've seen even a lot of organization coming out from such spaces. How can we document what has worked? Even when it comes to issues of decriminalization. I said in another session that decriminalization doesn't mean change of laws. We don't get to unpack what decriminalization is. It's bits and pieces. There are places we've seen where sex workers have a formal and an informal arrangement with like the police. sex workers have an arrangement with maybe their ministry, their local councils, and they have a very good working environment. How can we document that? And how can we make sure that what is working for communities continue working as we work towards the decriminalization work, like what Uganda is doing around the changing of law and going to court? What is working? What have they learned in the process? Can we document so that we can be able, as communities, to learn from these processes? Thank you.
Thank you. A really good reminder, Grace. And I think some of this exists, right? And maybe there is also a question about whether we have lost that capacity to document good practice in communities, the Sex Worker Academy, the work that is happening in Uganda right now. And I think that is a role that UNAIDS can play. And thank you for that direct ask. So 2 minutes each for Wiseka and for Lillian. You want to speak first, Lillian?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the other important point that would be good to bring to the attention of UNAIDS and all of us is that there seems to be some kind of conversation that seemingly is suggesting that we are doing better in terms of adolescent girls and young women. And coming from a region where we know that there's a big problem, we really need to be mindful about that in terms of what that means and how prepared we are to make sure that that generation is still given attention, particularly in terms of prevention. And one of the key things that, like I mentioned, wherever we are now, whatever we have achieved is because communities stood up. And one of the struggles that we are having currently is that we must mentor young people to take up that position, to take up that mantle. But being denied to do what they wanted to do yesterday makes them lose even more in terms of, is this the space where we want to be? Do we want to go that way? And therefore there has to be some kind of way of how we are going to make these young people get back to organizing, to mobilizing, to be able to lead this movement to ending AIDS, because they are the ones who are going to take us there.
Yeah.
We are not doing it anymore the way we used to do it, but somebody else has to do it. And our hope is in the young generation, and therefore there has to be some kind of confidence building again and support so that they are able to do that.
And a good reminder, and those of you who weren't at the opening ceremony, this is what Yolanda was sending over to Winnie, was a petition and a reminder that young people and young women in particular in this part of the world and in this part of the continent are particularly affected and need the focus and the attention politically, programmatically, financially. And it would have been nice if that would have been said by people themselves or young women themselves, and a good reminder about how attractive are we for young people as a sector, as a movement, and how encouraging are we for them to come up and speak their truth in this movement. Wiseka.
Okay. So I think mine is to maybe step away from, yes, we are sitting with this issue right now, but I think it's also a call for maybe rethinking about whether the mechanisms we've been using on community engagement will help us to create an open spaces and allow communities to, where the space is shrinking, to allow communities to remain in the space. And maybe it's something that we can explore with civil society and finding tools and ways to get us to 2030, what is required and support needed for communities to still remain in the room, still remain in the spaces where decisions are made, and continue to support, because there's going to be that carpet being pulled away. And that's where I think another opportunity between the agencies who are in the room to really think deep, how do we increase our support for community engagement in anticipation that the space will continue to shrink and other spaces will close down? How do we ensure that that doesn't happen? Because I think that's still within our reach, because we are funding community engagement. The other piece is that I think outside of the health conversation, although we have been safe and living in the bubble without community engagement, but it's clear that the democratic spaces and our participation and work with other organizations and partnerships in that space is not great. Because if we are also creating alliances and working in partnerships with maybe our unordinary partners, we could also see ways in which we can also make linkages, because whatever we are feeling, other people are also feeling it. And how do we make those connections? The last thing that I want to say, I think the diplomatic positions we are sitting in, UNAIDS, Global Fund, is good, because then we can protect the programs that are already in place. We can ensure that the safety of those programs is continuing to be delivered. But at the same time, I think the dilemma we are sitting with is that work is not shifting the political space. We can continue the pragmatic conversation and continue to deliver services, which is important because people's lives matter first, and we cannot put any risk on those programs because people will die faster than what we are trying to do to solve the other piece. And I don't think that's our place as the partners to do. It's the work of the partners on the ground in countries to work with governments to ensure that the political piece is also worked on to protect the other side. That's where I think most of us are sitting as activists in spaces and development spaces that we are struggling with that. And therefore, it's safe to say we will support safety and security of the programs. But we've seen the safety and the security of the program here. It's working. But when you come to spaces like this, the space is still continuing to shrink. So that's why I'm encouraging us to think about what other element needs to be added in our diplomatic voice. Is there anything we're missing that we need to strengthen in our diplomatic voice approach?
Great. Thanks, Wiseka. I did so well initially with my timing, and now I'm not so. I'm going to give Madiara the word, and there's a hand in the audience, and then I will have to stop because we have another session here. But I want to give Richard the last word before we close. So Madiara, are you going to speak in French?
Oui, je vais parler en français juste rapidement sur 2 points. Je pense qu'ils ont déjà suffisamment parlé de l'engagement communautaire, mais je voulais revenir sur ce que Winnie a dit, les échanges entre nous-mêmes, entre pays, les échanges sud-sud. Certains pays disposent de bonnes pratiques qui restent inconnues et qui peuvent apporter des réponses à d'autres pays qui démarrent certains programmes en direction de certaines populations. Donc, comment on peut aider, peut-être à travers l'ONU-SIDA, à documenter les bonnes pratiques qui existent au niveau communautaire et à créer des cadres d'échange entre les différents pays. Et comment même les partenaires comme le PEPFAR, le Fonds mondial, peuvent être associés aux initiatives, peuvent être associés à ce type de programme, de sorte à nous enrichir mutuellement. La deuxième chose, c'est les questions de sécurité des programmes en direction des populations clés. Sécurité pour les populations clés elles-mêmes, sécurité pour les prestataires, ceux qui sont engagés dans ces services en direction des populations clés. Donc, comment les programmes que nous définissons, que nous mettons en œuvre en direction des populations clés, peuvent systématiquement intégrer ce volet? Comment aider à modéliser les approches en termes de sécurisation des programmes en direction des populations clés? Je sais que FHI 360 a mis en place quelque chose, mais comment ONU-SIDA peut aider à travailler là-dessus? Et on sait qu'en général, dans nos pays, quand les élections approchent, 1 an ou 2 ans avant les élections, les politiques aiment bien utiliser le levier de l'homosexualité, de l'orientation sexuelle pour pouvoir attaquer les pouvoirs en place. Et donc, comment on peut anticiper, faire en sorte que dans les pays, quand on sait qu'il y a une élection qui arrive, on met en place un système pour pouvoir aider à améliorer la sécurité autour des programmes en direction des populations clés. Merci.
Okay, we'll try to summarize. The first point was how to make real the South-South exchange, documented best practice, and make it to help each other. And she was suggesting that Global Fund, the UNAIDS with Global Fund, and PEPFAR, any other donor could put their effort together to really document and organize the country exchange, the South-South to become a real exchange and learn to each other. That one. The second was, by the way, was done with Civil Society Institute in some meeting with Global Fund last year and prior with key population, was how do we guarantee the security of key population themselves and program for key population and implementers for key population, which is more and more a reality. As UNAIDS, We are with the civil society, as you know, Majara, and that was 2 meetings. All Global Fund was there. Everybody was there, and everybody agreed. And I think that it was. The third point was what? Yes, how to. We all know that in our country, 1 or 2 years before election, there is a tentative for the politician, to use this cultural thing, the homosexuality, sexual identity, to blame their predecessor, to make it a political thing. How could we anticipate that? How could we work in anticipation and prevent that by modeling something around key population and all of that? That was basically.
Thank you, and thank you for translating. Very briefly, please, in the audience.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Raymond Majambe. I'm with SRHR Africa Trust in Zimbabwe. My apologies, I came in a bit late. I just wanted to subscribe to what my other colleagues were saying, to say that I think what we have also noticed is that there are still gaps in investing in evidence generation. So we feel that it is important to invest in evidence generation, because what we have realized in our work is that if you look at those who are the adolescents in school, we have realized that there is a high number of STIs from those in marginal communities. And we have realized that it is important as well to strengthen school health-based initiatives around HIV prevention. So we are also calling around investments around strengthening school health-based initiatives to ensure that we also target adolescents in schools. Thank you.
Thank you, and I forgot you. We didn't tell you we changed the format. I apologize. Right, so I have heard a lot of things, and I think there's a lot of work for all of us to be done, which is about rethinking ourselves, rethinking our spaces, connecting better, but also thinking about other movements and going outside where we sit right now. And definitely, as Winnie has said, she will take some of the messages to some of the places she has access to really rethink about how we create safe space as a community to meet. But I wanted to give Richard the last word from the community, and I know I've not given everybody equal access, but I've tried. So please, Richard.
And thank you so much, and colleagues, and also Christy, for taking us through. I just want to say one of 3 things. The issue of data. We know, working together with UNAIDS, we're working on CLM. So I think we need to take that a notch higher. The findings that communities are able to identify, how to ensure that those gaps are supported so that we fill those gaps. So the issue of data would be really, really important, using community data to ensure that we work onto the response. The other thing is that our leaders at the UN agreed at the high-level meeting to a number of things, but it's very strange that after agreeing to them, the implementation is not being felt. So again, it's the role of UNAIDS to go back. Leaders need to be brought back on the table, and there's need to also start giving timelines. I think if we continue speaking without giving ourselves timelines, then the issues of criminalization will continue. The issue of tokenism will continue. So I think that really needs to work. The other part is the issue of ESA commitments. Last, I think 2021 at ICASA, countries recommitted. But we know that there are some other countries that did not commit, including my own country. So what is the role of UNAIDS? Yet we know very well that infections among young people are going high, yet we have policies and plans that could help us achieve those targets, and we're not doing anything. And lastly, I must say, as a person from a community, but also as a gay man being in a space where discrimination happens, in a space where we feel is an open space for all of us, should not be tolerated. And I think UNAIDS should not fall into the trap of endorsing and continuing to being part of this process. I think let's not legitimize where when things go wrong, I think we should start staying away. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So I know this was a whirlwind, and we probably all have more things to say and need more time. We will create that space. We're committed. I think we're committed between the different partners. But thank you. And also to say to all of you, UNAIDS is here. We are your partner. So come and talk to us about who is not being heard and who's being left behind in the conversation. That is our role at country level, at regional level, but also at global level. So I want to thank you for indulging us, for being a little bit off the cuff and a bit different this afternoon, but I think it was good. And I want you all to thank my fabulous panel for going with the flow and making it work. Thank you very much, everyone.